Now put our palms together and pay our respects to the Venerable One. All right, 3 bows, please. First bow. Second bow. Third bow. Okay, Longfo. Over to you, Longfo.
So meditate for half an hour?
Yes, please.
Sound like a plan?
Yep.
Okay. Meditate for half an hour. I'll give a bit of instruction and then we'll just sit in silence. So awaken to how you feel, how things are for you here, physically, the mood of the mind. Just know what it's like to be where you are right now. So that's like opening attention to the way things are, not choosing. And then choose sound. And let the sounds come to you. If it's silent, okay. If there's the sound of birds or air conditioner. And as you pay attention in this way, notice the silence of attention. The silence of knowing. So this isn't something you have to get, it's just remember, actually. Feel your hands. Feel the temperature, warmth of the hands, tactile feeling. Let that come into consciousness. Notice the silence of the mind. The silence of awareness. Feel the breathing of the body. Notice the silence of awareness with one in-breath. The silence of knowing with one out-breath. So it's a very receptive attitude. Non-becoming, non-resistance, just the way it is. And when you find yourself caught up with thinking, when you notice you're thinking, then realize that presence never went anywhere. There's always a sense of presence. So return to this sense of presence. By just knowing the breath. So don't try to get rid of thought or analyze it, it's just a part of nature. So let's meditate quietly with that.
Good evening, Long Po.
Hi, Shazing. How are you?
Yes, I'm well. Thank you.
Okay, good.
We'll now request for Dhamma talk. Brahma Jaloka Dipati Sampati Katanjaliya Divarangaya Chata Santi Dasata Parajaka Jatika Desi Dudama Anukampi Mampaja.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namissami. So hello everyone. Nice to be with you again. Hope you're all well. COVID free. So what's exciting in the monastery? Well, the meditation hall is going very nicely. And in the natural world, the does are giving birth to fawns right now. So you see the does go off into the tall grass, but there was an extraordinary sight. I didn't see it, but one of the lay friends saw it. And it was a doe that was standing, and Michelle had given the doe a couple of pears, and the fawn was coming out. See the legs of the fawn outside the body. So that would have been born in that very time. And then we don't see the fawns for a while, and then they start to come out. They're a bit more brave. So, and the nature here is really very, very interesting. And then there's the nature of the mind, which is the Dharma. And I thought today I'd like to, I keep going back to this reference in Ajahn Chah's biography, Stillness Flowing. And this is one of the senior nuns in his monastery who has long passed. And so she sums up his teaching. When he came, this is Ajahn Chah coming to give talks into the nuns' compound in Wat Pah Pong. In Wat Pah Pong, the monks and nuns live completely separately. So Ajahn Chah would go over to the nuns' compound and offer teachings. And I read this, I think the last 3 times, but I think it's a kind of, for me, it's an interesting summation of where she felt Lompo Chah was teaching from. When he came to give a talk, if there were a lot of newly ordained mechis present, he'd speak on a basic level, but not arguing, contending, knowing the meaning of the precepts. So that's sila, isn't it? The life that the social life that we live. So for lay people, it would include all the things about right livelihood, right communication, responsibility to your children, to your workplace, to your environment, rule of law, keeping your books balanced, not spending too much money, etc., etc. That would be all of that. So there's a lot to think about that. He'd speak on a basic level. On the intermediate level, he'd talk about training to abandon greed, hatred, and delusion, attachment to views and conceit, how to practice once our precepts were purely kept. And that's, of course, our emotional world, the world of our likes and dislikes and our emotional habits and the negativities we have and the strengths we have. So all that, the inner world that we all struggle with, and hopefully we get better at being not being overwhelmed by it or being more and more peaceful, psychological level. So we could talk a lot about that. On the highest level, he talked about what you'd see and what you'd experience when you practiced. He talked about the purpose of becoming a nun, about the highest goal of the monastic's life. He would talk about nibbana and anatta, and there being nothing worth attaching to. Sometimes you might ask an older Mechi, do you know what the state of your mind will be at the point of death? He taught us to know the know, and this is the line I keep coming back to. He taught us to know the knowing in the knowing, not the knowing of heat and cold, of pleasure and pain, of day and night, but the knowing in the knowing. So since I've been a monk for a while, obviously the latter part is the most interesting for me. But and so I'd like to comment on that again, but keep in mind that my early years of monasticism were not very refined. It was more like survival of the raging mind with its doubts and its greed, hatred, and delusions. So there is a lot to be said about just enduring some of the mental formations and emotional formations we all experience when life is not how we would like it to be, when we can't fulfill our desires. So there's certainly that. But it's important to consider that Buddhism can't just, if Buddhism was just a kind of psychological comfort, where we're not too extreme and where minds are kind of in a pretty good shape, that wouldn't be a transcendent understanding. It would still be in the realm of conditionality, which would be good. So the development of compassion and the development and the letting go of anger are very important things to do. But even if you develop emotional intelligence, as they say now, and you have a kind of a balanced inner world, the world is still a very fraught place. It's a very dangerous place. It's a very insecure place. It's always insecure, and that's the way of the worldly dhammas. The body can get sick anytime. There can be a war if you're in Ukraine. There's all kinds of things that can happen. So if we don't have a kind of transcendent refuge, then our engagement in the world, although we can sort things out, it's always fraught with some anxiety because things change. And that changing really doesn't depend on you. It depends on all kinds of other factors. So there's a possibility of always kind of being on guard or being tense or being anxious. How is this going to happen and how is it going to work out? So when Mechi says to know the knowing in the knowing, that to me is pointing to some transcendent realization. And that's a difficult thing to talk about because transcendence itself is not really about language, and yet we need language to talk. So one of the ways to consider that is to think about background and foreground. So like I'm sitting in the shrine room, and my visual perception in the foreground, there are friends, there are Buddha Rupas, there's a picture of a Wachal, a Liam. So that's the foreground. And then there's the background. I can see the tent, I can see the trees, I can't see the bear, not today. And then I can see the sky. So foreground, background. And our perceptions have that. If I listen to sound, I can hear the mechanical sound, maybe. Yeah, I can hear the mechanical sound in this building, and then maybe I'll hear a crow in the distance, foreground, background. Thought. What's the background of thought? Well, if I'm worried, the foreground is thinking about some problem which I have to solve, but the background is a mood. is the mood of worry, is the mood of fear, foreground, background. If we were to take, I've been trying to figure out a way to talk about this. If we were to take all sense experience as the foreground, all sights. So even though sight has a perception of distance, there is the foreground, there's the background. I could say sight is an object in awareness. It has qualities. I like it, I don't like it, whatever. It's pleasant, it's unpleasant, it's beautiful, it's ugly, it's far, it's near. Same as sound, taste, bodily feelings, smell, emotions, memories. These are all objects in awareness, and they come and they go. If that is the foreground, what would the background be? What would the background be? Compare it to space. One of the ways we talk about these ideas, if you have this room again, this room has 8 light fixtures and 1 in my face, and then 1 there. So it has 10 light fixtures and cream-colored walls. What else would you have? And a walnut table that I made here. So these are the objects in the room. There are friends, there are people, they're sitting here. There's the sound of my voice. These are objects. But there's all what makes the background of this room is space. If you didn't have the space, you couldn't perceive the objects. Now, we don't usually, we notice space, but we tend to be very much taken by objects. So what would you need to do to notice space? You'd have to take your attention away from the objects. Right? You can do that in the room you're in. Take your attention away from objects. My voice is a strong object. You're listening, so please don't fall asleep. But if you see what I mean, there is space, and that's a kind of background. So what would be the background of sense experience? So when we talk about sense experience, in the Pali terms, we talk about the 5 khandhas. I won't go into the Pali definitions or the 6 ayatana or whatever you want, but if you contemplate all sense experience, including your inner world of memories and thoughts and emotions, as the foreground, what would you need to do to pay attention to the background? And I think that's what the Mechi is doing, knowing the knowing. Now, when you can perceive the background, conscious space, shall we say, conscious awareness space, that's where you relax the mind. You don't relax the mind in the foreground. You excite the mind, you interest the mind, you fulfill the responsibilities of a normal life in the foreground of experience. So you do things, you make things, you develop skills, you pay your bills, you have a discussion with a worker or your boss or whatever. That's all the foreground. That's all the activity of life. We need to do that well. But you can't relax there. You don't really relax the mind because it's shifting, it's changing. Where you can relax the mind is when you start to perceive background. And how do you perceive the background? Well, that's very hard to explain. Because as soon as I say it's something, then you start to look for it as an object. So the way I try to indicate that possibility is when I say to you, listen to sound, but then let the sound come to you. Let the sound become conscious. So now attention isn't about the sound. Attention is more concerned with awareness itself. And then I'll ask people, I'll say, okay, notice that sound is in awareness. Then I'll say that the body is in awareness. Body is in awareness. And you start to intuit that awareness or knowing or presence, lately I like the word presence, that's always there. And it's not a quality. And it's not fraught with uncertainty because it's always there. Your health, your family, the government, the climate, the politics, your bank account, that's always very tentative, and you do your best to keep it in balance. But it's never sure. It's never a sure thing. But knowing that you know is a sure thing. Presence is a sure thing, because this couldn't take place without presence. And it's that relaxing of the mind to the state of being rather than the objects in being. These are difficult words that you find where Ajahn Chah's idea that meditation is a vacation of the heart. He would say that. I remember I think we did a retreat with the Singapore friends, meditating and do meditation as the vacation of the heart. Oh, what does that mean? Well, that can't be if you're holding on to an object of meditation. That's not a vacation, right? What does letting go actually mean? Because this language we use a lot, and it's a very important language. Well, at the coarsest level, you could say letting go was not following impulses which are harmful to yourself or others. So being a moral being. So if I want to hurt someone, I don't follow that. I have allegiance to an attitude of not hurting others. So those are the coarser, more obvious ways of letting go. If I'm addicted to peanut butter, I give up peanut butter. These kinds of significant things that we do. But that's really not transcendent. It's just streetwise to take care of yourself and not to get lost in negative emotions and so on. So the basis of Buddhist practice is living a good life, because what really compels us to be caught in the foreground of experience is greed, hatred, and delusion. And greed is always about an object. Hatred is about an object. Delusion is about ego and self, narcissism and worry and self-doubt, and the object is me and thought and all of that. So greed, hatred, and delusion, or tanha, or craving, we have different ways we talk about that, pulls you to the foreground of objects, pulls me to the thoughts and emotions, and my attention is constantly preoccupied with the foreground, with objects, with emotions, which isn't necessarily bad, and it's necessary to do that. I need to watch the ground when I'm walking, and I need to make sure that I don't walk into a wasp hive, and et cetera, et cetera. So the foreground is important, not dismissing it. But is that all there is? Is that all there is? And what is the Buddha's realization speaking to? There is the unconditioned, the uncreated, the unoriginated, the unborn, nibbana, peace, the island. What was that about? Well, it can't be about the foreground. It can't be about sense experience, because sense experience is just, it's not reliable. It's uncertain. We keep coming up with that language, and we don't own it. We don't really own our sense experience. We inhabit and witness through these sense doors. But if I owned any of my emotions, I just say what I want. Well, I'll have grumpiness today, and tomorrow I'll have joy. Thank you very much. It doesn't work that way. Grumpiness comes and joy comes. Now, there are factors that can be the causes for joy, compassion and generosity, and that's in the natural order of things. So a life lived, which is compassionate and generous and caring, is a life which isn't so addicted to the foreground. It doesn't really need much. A life of generosity and caring, and so it has a kind of lightness and openness and joy to it. And from that joy, or well-being, or self-love, I would say, that you appreciate your own being, there is a kind of freedom then to contemplate, well, what is the background? And this is the deeper ideas of letting go. People will say that, they think sometimes that letting go is not feeling anything, but that's not it. You feel things, you're an emotional being. But when you feel irritated by something, and you see, well, that's an object in awareness, and you make the reference knowing the knowing. Now is the knowing. And you open your mind, then that's letting go. It's not attachment. If the emotional valence or power of the irritation is powerful, then you feel that in the body. But your reference now is no longer trying to sort out everything, your emotions, and through analysis and through thought and through discussion and more ideas. That won't do it. It'll do it to a certain extent, but thought is not transcendent. Thought is not peaceful. Thought is movement. Thought is necessary. Thought is necessary. So when you find yourself thinking and your thoughts, like let's say you have a memory. Monica asked about memory last time. A memory comes up, you read something about someone you don't like, maybe, and let's say you get some kind of information about someone you don't like. And that information said that this person's a really good person, but you don't think so. Your emotional response to that will probably say, that's not true. I don't like this person. So that comes up naturally because of the conditioned mind. Now, what do you do with that? Do you then say, I shouldn't feel that way, or it's true? Any kind of discussion, inner discussion that way, still just with the foreground. It's not with the background. But if you notice that this is inner awareness, this thought is inner awareness, know the knowing, your mind opens to the transcendent, which is peaceful, which is energizing, which brings a lot of confidence. It's not an experience that's built up. It's something that's noticed and intuited and understood. It's more about right understanding than an achievement. It's not an achievement. Not an achievement at all. It's just a noticing, yeah. And so the exercises which I kind of have always found helpful is, first of all, and I keep saying this, is that you choose something very, very neutral, and then you list like sound, very neutral sound, nothing big deal, and you just allow the listening. You put more emphasis on the listening than the quality of the sound. If you're driving a car and you start to hear the gears grinding, you're concerned about the quality of the sound because your car is in trouble. Yeah, that's necessary. But not dismissing that, but saying, well, is there an alternative way of kind of contemplating what is possible in the human mind? Well, that's where you emphasize the listening rather than the sound. So in listening, just listening, allowing sounds to become conscious, you start to emphasize this knowing sound. And you see, oh, knowing, I know that I know. Okay, what's that about? It doesn't matter about the sound. Then you play around with your body, say your body feeling, like just the pressure of your body on the seat, say, on your cushion, your meditation cushion, on your chair. And you just allow that to become conscious. And this takes a silent kind of inquiry. And there's a kind of silence in inquiry, which is not the silence of suppression. You can suppress thought by focusing on something else, absorbing into something else, or you can inquire. You can silently inquire and look. And that's the silence that I think is most fruitful. So the silence of just noticing your body sitting on the chair. So I notice it. But I'm not making a comment about the quality of that physical experience. It's just, oh, there's the knowing of physical experience. And you start to notice that's the same knowing that knows sound. I do that with smell. I do that with emotions. That's more difficult because emotions just trigger thought. They just run, don't they? And then you become skillful at knowing emotion as emotion. So this person that you read about, you see the memory comes up, a negative memory. You don't like that person, but you don't go to judgment or trying to get rid of it or trying to figure it out or running with it. You say, oh, yeah, this is in awareness too. Emotion is in awareness. So you're emphasizing awareness all the time, emphasizing awareness. And then you start to intuit that awareness, consciousness, space, All these are kind of synonymous, and you learn how to relax them on into that space. And then you're home, and that's your real home. And when you find your real home, then although you have to participate in other areas, you start to have this lovely confidence that, yeah, it's always there. I know that I know. Now, that is something that you have to investigate and see if it's true, because if you just try to figure this one out intellectually, you just be thinking. And it's not about thought. Thought is useful. Thought could direct your attention. So one of the ways I was trying to this last year direct people to that possibility is like playing around with sort of a koan type thing. I said, is presence ever absent? You've heard me say that. Is presence ever absent? Now to do that, if you just intellectually try to figure out, you go nuts. It's not, but it's a question that should bring you to silence. So then you're meditating and you start thinking right there. When you notice thinking, ask yourself, was presence ever absent? And if you're attentive, you'll see, no, presence was never absent. You know that you know, and you start to not worry about thought, not try to get rid of thought, not get caught up in the endless analysis of thought, but you step back into the silence of knowing. The memories come and go, thoughts come and go, and you start to intuit where peace really lies. And then all the language of that you find in the literature, when Lompo Dun says the mind knowing the mind is the end of suffering, when or like one of the analogies that you often have is when you have a page of text. If I look at this book, there's the page of text, and the text is in black. But what about the page? What about the white of the page? We don't notice that because we're enthralled by the text. Then we go to the next word and the next word. And so the background is the white of the page. That's another kind of analogy you'll find I use, we use, whoever uses. So I guess I would ask you, is your view of Buddhism simply, obviously it's about living a good and honest and generous and compassionate moral life, the kind of bodhisattva idea that you find in Mahayana. But what do you think Lompo Cha might mean when he says meditation is the vacation of the heart? Would that make any sense to you? How would you investigate that? Or when Mechi says to know the knowing in the knowing, not the knowing of black and white, good and bad, not that dualistic knowing, but that which is behind it, like presence. Would that make any sense to you? So what I would hope is this kind of enigmatic bunch of ideas would lead you to a kind of investigation, a really kind of quiet inquiry into the background of silence, the background of knowing, the space of knowing, the space of consciousness, of being, different words that we use. And to see that the foreground, the endless trying to sort out, like trying to be a perfect person is hopeless. You know, I like give it up, Viradhammo. and yet you can be self-critical until you die. You did it wrong. And what is that about? That's the foreground. Which isn't to say that you go around robbing banks and hurting people. That's not it either. But to see that trying to get your emotions perfect, that you're always compassionate, and you always have upekkha, and that every response in life is perfectly adequate and timely is a bad movie. But it's not real life. Real life is that you say stupid things and you get grumpy and you write emails which are then horrible and you regret them. And I think that's real life. And you do your best. And actually, when you abide in the silence of the mind, you do better and better and more skillful. But to always be caught in some kind of perfectionism or self-judgment or judgment of others, it's the foreground. There's a foreground of thought, of greed, hatred, and delusion. So greed, hatred, and delusion or craving, they drive you into experience. They pull you into experience. They repel you from experience. And experience is good, bad, and indifferent. Hopefully you all have a great experience tomorrow. May you have a good day. But is there something which is larger than experience, larger than the khandhas or beyond the khandhas? Is the Buddhist teaching just that the khandhas are anicca, dukkha, anatta? Is that all there is? Is it just that? Is it just kind of a nihilism? Or did the Buddha actually realize something? In Ajahn, in this book, at the end, one of the Western nuns asks Lompa, well, what about listening to Bach and Beethoven? It's really spiritual music, very beautiful. And I don't think he's heard Bach or Beethoven, but he says, you should hear the beauty of the mind. And so he's talking about something he's realizing, something very beautiful, but it's not a sense experience in the sense of something being built up and held on to. Music can maybe bring you to that, I don't know, but music itself is conditioned. You need an ear that can hear. You need good music that appeals to you, which is fine. But that's pleasure. That's pleasure. But pleasure also begets pain. Nothing wrong with that. That's just the duality. But is there something beyond that duality? And that, I think, if we don't have that in Buddhism, we don't have the full teaching. That's why Lompa Samedo's teaching to me has always been based upon that statement. There is the uncreated, the unoriginated, the unborn, the deathless. That's why he named Amaravati, the deathless realm. And that inclination is a kind of positive inclination. The other, the via negativa, the kind of, it's not this, that's important too. It's not thought, it's not emotion, it's not sense experience. So you get sense experience and do the best you can, live a good life, but then you turn your attention to the mind knowing the mind. That's a more positive inclination. It's a kind of direction. Silence is a key. When I ask you to listen to sound, you just do that like a millisecond, right? You notice the silence of knowing, correct? Because you're paying attention. You're not like concentrating. You're not trying to hold and suppress thought, just noticing something. Just noticing something. And that's the silence of inquiry. So when you use the silence of inquiry to say, well, I know that I know, and abide as that, and wait for nothing, then you begin to intuit your guho, which is the space, the silence, the knowing, the emptiness of the page as opposed to the print on the page. All right, I'll leave that for your reflection.
Andamayam ovadagata sadhu karang kadamase sadhu 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 anumodami.
Thank you, Lompa. So I'd like to now open the floor for questions and answers. If you have comment or response to Lompa's question earlier on, please feel free to ask to unmute yourself. Anyone have a comment or response to Lompa's question?
How Yi? Say hello to Su Yi for me. Wish her well for me.
Thank you, Lompa. Thanks. Actually, she felt very validated after receiving, Lompa, your reply. And actually, for that day, she felt very much better. And I think it's helping her because with your guidance, Lompa, she knows what to continue doing. very much appreciate, Paul.
Yeah, she has that basic insight. So now it's applying it to these more extreme circumstances. But it's tough.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's very tough to adjust to a loss of a sense faculty.
Very hard. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I could just speak to that a bit, not specifically. When someone loses something, something profound, like someone gets chronic Lyme's and they can't function, or when they lose their eyesight, or when there is a loss in the family, or there's an unexpected betrayal, and so on and so forth. These are huge losses on the psyche. It's just so psychologically confusing, and one has to realize that the life we live is grounded in a kind of somewhat predictable reality, and when that reality is taken away from us through illness or loss, it's really difficult to adjust. And if one has then had a chance to kind of experiment with this idea of a background as opposed to the foreground, then when the foreground is so fraught with pain and loss and grief, you don't know what to do. You can't sort it out in the foreground. Your emotions are all over the place, and psychologically, you don't have your boundaries, or whatever it is. I've been through that once, and it's just so confusing, so utterly confusing. And certainly one just has to endure. But if you've had some sensibility that there is a background even to horror and difficulty and so on, if you've had some sense of that, you start to remember that. You start to remember how to open the mind to not just to the difficulty, but to the space within which the difficulty arises and ceases. It's hard. It's very, very hard. And those are the reminders that I try to give to people, because if you give a reminder to someone who has a deep loss and say it will change, or it'll be okay, or don't worry, that's not really helpful, because it kind of dismisses their horror. So you have to, I think, acknowledge, yeah, this is horrible. This is very, very difficult, and that's helpful. And then I think for me, what I try to advise is, can you get a sense of space around this? And it might be difficult in the beginning, but if a person has practiced that and kind of has an insight, then there's a possibility of remembering that in extremis, in this kind of extreme situation. If, however, meditation has been a kind of suppression and calming of all the internal noise, and that's the only thing the person knows how to do, and then that ability isn't available, the meditation collapses and falls apart. Why? Because that meditation is dependent on an object. It's dependent on the foreground. So having breath meditation is fine, but what happens when you get asthma? Or they put a ventilator on you? Where's your refuge? Can't be the breath. But if the breath meditation is then pointing to the space and silence, which is the background, then great. Then it's about the background. It's not about the breath. It's about the foreground. So then your meditation object is serving something larger than itself. But if meditation is just like time out, calm the mind down, which is a good thing, but it's dependent on an object, when the situations are so overwhelming, there's no refuge. So breath meditation is not a refuge. It is a good tool, a brilliant tool. The Buddha taught it, anapanasati, but it can't be a refuge. So what would refuge be? So does the meditation, does it serve refuge, or is it just something to pacify the mind? And Ajahn Chah's sort of simile of that was, if you do meditation and you're just suppressing things, you might get calm, but he said it's like putting a rock on the grass. Put the rock on the grass, grass doesn't grow, take the rock off, the grass grows again. That was the image he gave. So hopefully your whatever meditation you do serves that your meditation can segue into normal life very easily. To me, that's an indicator of good meditation, that it can move into complexity and into other kinds of responsibilities, because you understand that this background, you can always refer to that, relax to that. Whereas if meditation is one thing, and then complex social life is another thing, that to me is going to be very liberating. It'll give you some pause, yeah, and you'll probably be more mindful for the first half hour, but maybe not for the next, So does your meditation just move quite fluidly to the next experience, And if it's about the background and the foreground, yes, it should really serve. Like, I find, like, if I meditate quite a lot in the morning, that really helps me in doing carpentry and doing furniture making. It really does. And so it's not like meditation isn't separate from the complexities of life. That is something I thought was true way back, because I could do things and then pacify the mind and be complexity of my emotions and fears and all of that. That just came up into the surface, and that was important. I need to pay attention to that. Does anyone ask any questions? Have we got a hand? Okay, shall we?
No, I was just giving thanks.
Okay. There's Shri. Hi, Miri. Unmute yourself. There you go.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm at a holiday house, so the connection may not be very good, but it was just really just worth it to comment that somehow as you were talking and there were birds hopping around, and that I'm asking a question, David. Yeah.
Extra coffee.
Yes, I'll have extra coffee. He's asking if I want extra coffee. so, yes. Viradhammo. Yeah. Sorry.
Hi, David.
It's David's from part. There's a group of people. So anyway,
Okay.
it's just beautiful fairy wrens and everything hopping around. So with the nature, so I could really resonate with the. We don't have any bears here in Australia, but just going back to I really love the teaching of the. I love that how you talk about the foreground and the background. Just how that was just. I just wanted to comment on just how helpful that is. Just and so do you mean that the background is actually to all the sense experience is that sense of presence, that silent awareness, and that's so you try to make you don't try to make the background the foreground, because the foreground is all the sense objects, but you try to just attend to it nevertheless. Is that's the idea?
Exactly, right.
Yeah.
So you can see how the language of letting go works there, because you're letting go, you're not grasping another thing called presence.
Yes.
You're letting go, you become available, and you notice that which is always there. Exactly. Yeah.
Yes. What you actually really are.
Yeah. What I would say your real home, or the language of self gets difficult there, because it's always the language of self is kind of individuated and so on. So in the end, it's not a self-definition, it's a confidence. There's a confidence that comes about by abiding as you're saying, and then you see that is the result. And there's a confidence, yeah, that's the path, that works. And that's what you want to get to. We don't really have to think about it. You just have that confidence.
Yeah. It's wonderful. Every now and then it just kind of like clicks in, and it's just like this zing, this all the time, like this resonant. Yeah. It's really wonderful
Yeah.
when occasionally when it just it's just permeating everything. It doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it's like it feels.
Well,
yeah.
Well, your livelihood is very intellectual. So you're revving up the old brain cells quite a lot.
Yeah.
Right. My livelihood is like is different. So accessing that, but I do think that with thought, if you can use that phrase, is presence ever absent, you'll notice that when you're meditating, when you notice thought, usually you're trying to get rid of thought. You know, I've got to meditate more. And that's Viradhammo. That's the foreground.
Mm-hmm.
And the assumption is that you haven't been around. But actually, when you really notice, presence was never absent. And then that's the key to letting go of thought. And that's so important, because thought is so pernicious and you know, it doesn't give up. And so there's the struggle with thought, and then you're still in the foreground.
Yeah, I'll leave it here. Let other people ask.
Okay, Miri.
Thank you.
Give my best to David.
I will.
Okay, enjoy the coffee. David.
Yes, before we jump to David's question, if David can give me a second, there is a type question here, Longpo.
Okay.
Could Longpo please elaborate on pleasure begets pain, which you mentioned in the talk earlier on?
Well, pleasure and pain are part of our sense experience. So I experience life through a body, and this what happened. So I got a sliver in here the other day, and that sliver was painful. So I put a pair of gloves on when I was working with rough wood. So the sliver is painful, which is naturally necessary for me to be careful, such as the nature of sense experience. I ate half a tomato at lunch. It was a very delicious tomato. I enjoyed it. Now, if that was pleasant. Now, if tomatoes weren't pleasant, I wouldn't eat them. If food wasn't pleasant, I wouldn't eat them. So pain and pleasure are biological necessities. Trouble with pain and pleasure are that you can manipulate the world to a certain extent to maximize pleasure and minimize pain. And we all do that. We get comfortable in whatever, but it has a limit. And because it has a limit, and if you think that's the only thing there is in life, the manipulation of the painful and the pleasant, you think that's the only thing you can do, then you're always having to be in the sense realm trying to get it just right, tuning it up all the time. And that will not liberate the mind. It'll give you as much comfort as possible. Of course, things will happen which will be unpleasant. There will be loss. You'll have no choice around. And things which are pleasant quite often will come to you. They're not available because of certain factors. So you could get very frustrated or angry or whatever. So pleasure and pain are not wrong, and will always be functioning within them, but they're not liberated. They're contingent. They depend on other things. So the Buddhist teaching is that without saying that pleasure and pain are wrong, like that pleasure is wrong and something like that, it's not a moral judgment on pleasure and pain. It's just not the place to look for liberation. Pleasure and pain is where you look for being comfortable or having an aesthetically pleasing environment. So in terms of us building a meditation hall, we're trying to create an aesthetically pleasant surrounding because we think it would be helpful for meditation. But that's not liberating. That's not liberating at all. It's just aesthetics. Aesthetics are fine. So, but what is liberating is when you are no longer dependent on pleasure and pain. So let's say one of the monks here, he has chronic Lyme's disease. A lot of people in this part of the world have chronic Lyme's disease. And he's in a lot of pain. He gets a lot of pain, and it's really kind of, and he's got other health issues too. But he's able to do yoga nidra and abide in the space of awareness where the pain comes and goes, but his mind isn't picking it up. His mind can be free and spacious and empty. But the pain is very, very real. And he does everything he can to cure it. So he's in tune with all kinds of medical things, but it's bigger than the medicine right now. Hopefully he'll get past it. But the meditation, because he can go to the background rather than be in the foreground all the time, the meditation serves him as the body goes through its painful cycles. If you don't have that, okay, what are you going to do? Well, you do your best with medicine and so on, but you have no refuge. And I think a lot of people who then get like chronic illnesses and things, they grow into that because they have to just to survive psychologically. So to maximize pleasure and minimize pain is a very restless activity. But what you can also do is when you start to contemplate that there are other kinds of pleasure in life which are emotionally not based on sense experience, like generosity, like compassion, like kindness, which isn't dependent on a sense experience. It's really about the heart responding from a non-selfish place. You find other modes of pleasure. Now, you can't always be compassionate or kind, but you can cultivate that. You can't always be generous, but you can cultivate that. So cultivating these good qualities of the heart brings you a kind of pleasing inner world, which then doesn't need so much from the external world. There's more gratitude, there's good memories, etc., etc. So the heart feels more and more at ease because the emotional life is not selfish, right? It's not, and it's more patient and so on. And then if that becomes the basis for one's inner world, then the capacity to do this kind of inquiry into what is being, what is awareness, what is consciousness, moving into that, it helps to discover that, and that's something that's beyond pleasure and pain, and that's why we call it transcendent. Now, that doesn't mean that when one realizes that, then one then says, well, I won't take any Novocaine for my tooth. It's not necessary. You might give it a go, but I don't think it's necessary. You don't have to give up like medicine and so on, but you do find that because the heart is now fulfilled through the silence and space of the mind, it needs less. And the distractions are boring, really. Distractions are less and less interesting because the heart feels fulfilled. And then what else is there to do but live in a life of compassion and generosity? Because you have energy. This gives you energy. That is energy. So the whole definition of pleasure and pain starts to change. And that which was pleasurable before now is noisy and grating and maybe raucous. And the mind appreciates more quietness, more silence, doesn't want to go outside, doesn't want to be pulled into things because it has a kind of silent refuge. I think we all, I mean, that's probably the experience of aging too. That's natural. But it is more than that. I think it's appreciation of there is an inner world which is very fulfilling, which isn't based on sense experience and not based on distraction and so on.
Thank you, Long Paul. I hope that answers your question, Ajahn. David, can you? Yes.
Hey, David.
Hi, Ajahn. Glenda.
Yes, I love this. I also find this so helpful, the foreground and the background. And would it be fair to say that when everything in the foreground is able to relax, thoughts, feelings, impulses, and such, and all that just subtracts, what remains is just the background, is presence. That we're born with it, and it's just what's always there in the background, but we don't have to build it up or we don't, it's just there. It's always there, like essence energy. It's like essence. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, that's one way of thinking about it. And that's it, because it's not born, does not die. Birth and death takes place, but there's the knowing of birth and death taking place, birth and death of egos, say, or whatever. And it's ineffable, it's a mystery. What is that? And if you try to define it too much, like your language suits you because you have an intuition about it and use that language, and then other people have other language to intuit that. But when you ask people about this, whether they're Buddhist or Christian, and they are sincere seekers, you find the same kind of intuition. It's easy to share the language around that because it's not dogma. So trust that intuition, and the result should be a kind of confidence. Yeah, this is the path. This works, and it segues into normal life in a way where you are more and more available to whatever is needed, whatever needs done. And then sometimes there's an upwelling of old emotions or memories, and that's fine too. So because you're not judging yourself from the foreground, you realize the ineffable constant nature of the background. Then if old karmic habits of fear come up, you don't say, oh no, I've lost it. There's that fear again, or there's that anger. No. It's just another, I call it just old gas coming out. Old karmic gas. And then because it's not a problem. Whereas if you have an idea, I've worked through this, I've worked through those fears, and I've worked through that anger and all that. You take that road, then you get frightened and angry. Oh God, my practice is down the tube. No, that's the foreground. You are not your old karma. That's not your real home. That's just stuff coming out. So you can't get fooled. You can't get fooled, because that's always available. So that intuition of yours, I trust that, and explore that, and then see what grabs thinking, or what creates a strong sense of self, a strong sense of me, either self-doubt or worry, or anger, whatever. That's the attachment to the foreground. And then what would it take to relax that into the space and openness of the background? That's always the ongoing practice we're doing with our particular conditionings and habits and all the rest of it. We're constantly remembering this through the complexities of our emotional life and inner life. All right.
Thank you. Yes, that was very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, good. All right. There's Karen. Hi, Karen.
Hi, Longpo. Hi. Longpo, I wanted to ask you a question. I mean, I'm a big fan of your yoga nidra. I think I like lying down meditation a bit too much. Yesterday, I had this interesting experience when I was doing lying down meditation, and as the thoughts fell away, there was this deep sense of fulfillment, and it's interesting because I didn't realize I was sleeping until I came out of it. And it was quite funny because I could hear myself snore. But I was only able to realize that I was sleeping until I came out of it. And is that your experience in Yoga Nidra, where there's consciousness, kind of like a substrate consciousness rather than a full-on consciousness that actually permeates right through it?
Yeah, that's very hard to explain because the sense of self isn't functioning there. And the sense of self is memory. So the usual ways that we compute what happened in the past is through self and memory. And that's not functioning there. So it's like you come out of that and say, wait a minute, awareness was there. And that's a very interesting investigation that's terribly difficult to actually talk about. Because waking life is the sense of self and time, and that you can compute normally. Dream life and deep sleep, it seems like you're unconscious, but when you take refuge in presence more and more, you get this other intuition. happening. And I think all you can really do is allow the kind of sense of being curious about presence or awareness, and let any insights come to you, because it's terribly difficult to try to figure out, because then you go to thought. So the more you can go to silence and just allow wisdom to function, then insights will show you. In the Advaita tradition, and I think some of the Theravada monks that we know, they'll say that awareness functions in waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, which is pretty powerful kind of statement. But that only makes sense, that if there is the unconditioned, the uncreated, the unoriginated, the unborn, it can't disappear. And that, like logically. And yoga nidra is a way to investigate that. And the snoring is interesting. You hear yourself snoring, but actually what your mind has done, it's sunk deeper into a deeper consciousness. It's relaxed, and you can be aware of that.
Thank you, Long Paul. I thought I was kind of hallucinating it, so I thought I'd check with you.
Maybe you were. I don't know, but I can relate to what you said. There's a lot of mystery in this that one just has to open to and allow the mystery. This is where you stop trying to find an answer. You stop trying to figure it out. You abide more and more in trust and availability and openness and waiting, but waiting for nothing. That kind of language starts to make a lot of sense, because the analytical mind can only come to a dead conclusion, because it's thought, and thought is really just old stuff. And now you don't want to come to thought conclusions. You want awareness to just indicate what it is itself.
What was interesting, right, how deeply fulfilling it was and how healing it was.
Yes. So trust that, because there's something very significant about that. But if you look for it as an experience, then you're finished, because then you're in the foreground. And so the difficulty with profound meditative or contemplative experiences is they create greed. And then you try to repeat the experience. And then, of course, you're in the foreground looking for that pleasant experience. So it takes a lot of patience and waiting for nothing, allowing things to unfold. All right.
Thank you, Long Paul.
Okay.
Thank you, Long Paul. Is there no more questions from the floor? Any more last questions?
There's a hand. Tuttiyampi.
Yeah, I'd like to comment more on most of my life before I discovered Buddhism. I was doing a lot of psychotherapy, and I would shop around, go to different psychotherapies, try this, because I was always on this kind of quest to self-improvement, or to change myself, or to get rid of my neurotic strivings. So I'd like to say you comment more on, and some people can use meditation the same way, trying to strive to be something different than who you are, get beyond your conditioning. Can you comment on how that is not a good way to go?
You can see, David, that it makes sense in the beginning. If I'm just a really confused puppy and I'm always just getting angry at people and so on, okay, I have a bit of work on it, being a better human being. But there comes a time where you realize that although you make adjustments to be more restrained and you don't follow road rage and all that kind of stuff, it seems endless, because it's based on the sense of a me becoming another kind of a me. And that fallacy is just, it's like just going around all the time, chasing your own tail. So there comes a time where you are okay with your emotions being negative, because now you can see them as something that comes and goes. You don't have to correct them. And you're okay with not being a nice guy or not being clever, because you can see those as objects. And then because you see them as objects, you find the space of awareness is more interesting than the objects. And people who just chase like self-improvement things, it's sad because they have a good intention, but self-improvement is like you can't improve a self that doesn't exist. It's just a bunch of dependently originated stuff that comes and goes and comes and goes. So the Buddhist teaching is that it doesn't teach that there's an ego or a personality as such. It's the stream of consciousness conditioned in a certain way. And the thing about being a better person is to learn how not to be sucked into stream of consciousness all the time, to step back and know, oh, that's just thought, that's just emotion. Whereas the judging mind, of the perfection mind, is always, oh, that's not a good one, and I should be better, and I've got to try harder. And that's still stream of consciousness, self, I, sense of I, and it's endless. Whereas all you need is enough awareness to see it's an object. If it's a crappy object, fine. If it's a grumpy object, fine. Just don't hurt your partner. Don't hurt your guy, don't hurt your dentist, because, just like be a decent person. But then perfection is impossible, because the emotions, they come and they go. But the space, that's perfect, because it has no qualities. And that's what you want to abide as. So if your conditioning now has been towards the perfection of personality, that will be a karmic habit. And the way you have to work with that is to see the judgment as an object. So, you might say something which is a bit not up to your standards, and then immediately the mind will say, oh, that's no good. That's just a conditioned mind. And then say, but that's in awareness. So emphasize awareness rather than the quality of the thought, or the quality of the emotion. So awareness isn't the quality. Right? It's the space of knowing qualities coming and going. And that's the Buddhist teaching on anicca dukkha anatta. It's this reference to the awareness rather than the quality of your sense experience. Refer to that. And again, like I say, listen to sound, emphasize the listening rather than the quality of sound. You have an emotion, emphasize the knowing of the emotion rather than the quality of thinking around it. It's a difficult training because of these conditions are ingrained into us over years and years and years and years. So any sense of I that comes up, David, is a self-judgment. See that as an object. And don't try to then say to yourself, well, I shouldn't be judging myself, because that's another thought. Thinking is that way. It just goes from one to another, never really ends. So then you could say, you could do things like, I'm a bad person. And then stop. And just stop at the end of the thought. I am hopeless. And then listen to the silence at the end of thought. And then before you say it, notice the silence. And say, I am a basket case. And so you start to see that thought is in silence. It comes and goes in silence. You start to get that perspective of space and so on. And thought is very compelling. Very, very compelling. That makes sense?
Yeah, totally.
All right.
Thank you,
Laura.
There's a final question from Laura.
Hi, Laura. You got a picture?
I do. Hi.
How can I help you?
I wanted to share two impressions today. I have heard this description that you make of background and foreground described as the blue of the sky and all of the clouds that pass by, and how the background is the blue of the sky, which is always there, while all of the sensations and the thoughts and the are the clouds. And of course, sometimes it's a clear, lovely, sunny day and it's blue in the sky. And then there are other days when the sky is black and the blue is not anywhere to be seen. But that does not mean that the blue of the sky is not behind those clouds. So
Right.
that was an impression, a concept that I have heard before and resonated with me, because I can certainly understand the relationship between the blue of the sky and the clouds.
That's
And the
excellent
other
example.
thing- Thank you. The other comment I wanted to make, and perhaps you can speak to it a bit, is that the relationship between pleasure and pain is because of the transitory, the impermanent nature of pleasure, much like when you go on a holiday and it's a lovely week by the sea and the warmth. And then one day, a week later, you will have to pack your bags and return to whatever cold, wintry, and so that pleasure, the end of that pleasure, is what will trigger that pain.
But there's also displeasure. You break your
Yes,
leg.
but- Yes.
You break your leg, that's some serious displeasure. Or you get, someone comes up to you and insults you. And then the pleasure is when that ends.
Yes, so the relationship is the same. You know, I broke my hand in January, and from past experience, I knew that it was painful and the cast was uncomfortable and it was causing me quite a bit of displeasure. But I also knew there was these two shall pass, and the cast will come off, and you will feel, I wouldn't call it pleasure, but the relief, which could also be pleasurable. So it's
but that's that relief is dependent on pleasure.
yes,
What is the relief that's not dependent on pleasure or pain?
that blue of the sky.
That's it. That's it, right? So
If you
certainly, you
find
take,
it.
if I have a sliver in the hand, I take it out, and there's
Yeah.
the pleasure of that. And if I'm thirsty, I drink water. But
Yes.
this is a transcendent realization, which isn't dependent on that causality. That causality is important. We need to know that, otherwise we wouldn't survive as human beings. Sure, but there's the blue of the sky. I think it's a good metaphor, isn't it? Yeah.
It is. I also think that it helps to try and find that blue of the sky when you're able to, I don't know if understand is the right word, because that sounds too intellectual, but when you know that both the pain and the pleasure and the relief, that all that shall pass, it helps to then find a way to the blue of the sky.
That's true. That's true. Otherwise, it could seem infinitely painful or whatever. That's true. So it's a good way of suggesting that you don't get caught in the foreground. This too will pass, and then you're available to the background. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
That's all. Thank you.
Okay, Laura. Thank you for your question.
Well, it leaves us all now to say thank you to you, Lumpur. We come to the end of the session. I'm very grateful for your kindness and your very patient and endearing and deep teaching.
Okay, Bita. My pleasure.
Okay. Lumpur, shall we close by reciting the words of the Buddha?
Yeah, let's do that. Should we lead here?
Yes, please, Lumpur.
Our voices will lead, okay.
Yeah, I'll put up the lyrics.
Put it up on the screen. Right, here we go. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties, and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm, and wise and skillful, not proud and demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove, wishing in gladness and in safety. May all beings be at ease, whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born. May all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another, even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child. So with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings, radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, free from hatred and ill will, whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness. One should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding, by not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. Okay, everyone. See you.
So brothers and
See you
sisters,
next.
we'll now pay respects to Longpo as he takes his leave and take his teachings with us in our heart and in our practice. 3 vows, please. First vow. Second vow. Third vow. Thank you, Longpo, and see you in 2 weeks for the final session of this season.
Okay. See you. Nice to be with you. Be well. Stay healthy.